Approximately 1:12 p.m. We're here for Elevator Advisory Board meeting. We'll do our roll call. Brian Morris is present. Scott Anderson?
Present.
Nancy Crumley, absent. Grayson Gill?
Here.
Present. John McGraw, not currently here. I understand he's en route, but he's absent at this time. Lawrence Taylor is absent. Ron Nimchkit is absent, and Greg Tamaz is absent. So therefore, the committee, the board has failed to have a quorum. But since we do have the public announcements, since we do have some of the board members here, there are some items that we can discuss. Since we don't have a quorum, there will be no votes taken. There will be no decisions officially made by the advisory board. So therefore, I think we'll go ahead and skip. We can't even approve the minutes, can we?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so the next, then we'll go ahead and skip down to agenda item F for public comment. Because I understand that we do have one member here from the public. So we want to go ahead and afford you public comment?
No.
No? Okay, all right. The public has no comments. And like I mentioned, we will go ahead and skip the agenda items for the staff reports, compliance reports, educational report, enforcement division, licensing division. And we can't get into the discussion of work groups for penalty or for the penalty matrices. So we're zooming down to item I, which we discussion of the proposed changes to administrative rules. I guess as I understand it, the state legislature passed House Bill 3741 that added some provisions and that's already been adopted, and we're charged with incorporating that House bill into the TDLR administrative elevator rules. I think at this time, staff has presented us with some recommendations on, possible recommendations on the changes. So I have Mr. Johnson moving forward, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Charles Johnson, Assistant General Counsel. You have in front of you, for discussion purposes today, without voting on any of the content, a proposal to implement House Bill 3741. In order to do that, what we've done, and I'm sorry, there are also some additional edits here that don't relate to House Bill 3741, but are intended to clarify some existing provisions. The first change is to 74.10, subsection 29, which is a definition for out-of-service equipment, or out of service. And if you look at the current rules, there are 3 or 4 concepts that are closely related. There's out of service, removed from service. So we inserted a specific definition for out of service so that it's distinct from the new provision that'll be proposed for the implementation of House Bill 3741. So the first edit is intended to clarify what out of service means, so that when we get to removed from service, they're distinct, separate concepts. And so the next change is same section, subsection 37, we get removed from service. And again, we're trying to distinguish between out of service, removed from service, in accordance with the mandate of 3741. And so removed from service has been defined in subsection 37, and we've also attempted to clarify reportable condition. And we've given comments from the new member to the board, Mr. Taylor, who had concerns about, let me find that. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Lawrence's comments.
His comment to subsection 29 was to strike reference to a specific code section. And I pretty much agree with that because the code does change, and we put a section in our rule, then we have to change the rule every time the code changes. So that comment about the rule changes is something that I think, well, the staff thinks should be done just for convenience going forward. His other comment was to subsection 38, which was the reportable condition. What we tried to do here was to move away from explosions and death and those kinds of instances, so that any event that occurs at a facility that doesn't involve an explosion wouldn't, under the current rule, would not be reported. And so this is an opportunity to grab all the instances of conditions that we should be aware of at each of the facilities. So this kind of broadened that whole concept. In 7450, there's a new subsection F, which requires the building owner to notify the department and submit an application to remove equipment from service. In 7455, reporting requirements simply says that the inspector has to report equipment that's been removed from service. We made some editorial changes in 7469. You can see the strike through of, again, consistent with broadening the concept of what, moving away from life-threatening events to kind of a generalized approach to what gets reported. 74.74 simply says that the inspector is not required to follow the procedures in 74-105, which is the actual process for taking equipment out of service. This is just a notation to the inspector that they are required to follow those procedures. 74.80 imposes a fee for the application to take equipment out of service. And the final revision is the reason we're here, which is to establish procedures for taking equipment out of service. I'm not going to walk you through the actual language, but I'm going to talk about the concept that we're trying to capture in this section. One is to, in subsection A, making it clear how you take equipment out of service. And it says that the inspector, that the equipment has been removed from service by a registered inspector. So only an inspector who's registered with us can take it out of service. Not the owner, not the contractor, but the inspector is required to take the equipment out of service if the owner submits the application, and in order to implement it, it has to be done by an inspector. And 1, 2, and 3, subsections 1, 2, and 3, essentially says how you do it. You take it to the lowest level, you disconnect the power, and you, for elevators and escalators and elevators, there's a process here. In subsection 3, it's all the other related equipment that is not an elevator or an escalator. Subsection B tells the building owner how to restore power to that elevator. And what this section is intended to address are instances where the power has to be restored, but the elevator is not yet in use. So subsection B says that if you want to reconnect the power, for example, to work on it, it's the various things short of bringing it back into service, subsection B picks that piece up. And then subsection your subsection C, we're going to strike subsection C on your version. Your corrected version has subsection C removed. The version you received, yes, sir.
Question real quick, Grayson Gill. On 74-105A1,
Okay.
what's the significance of saying the lowest level landing? You know, if, for example, if they're going to take it out of service for purposes of remodernizing the interior of the cab, not the mechanical side, and they want to do that work on a vacant floor, why are we saying it has to be on the ground floor or the lowest level?
I think the discussion that was, I'll let Mr. Moran actually answer specifically, but as I recall, the general discussion was that this was kind of a code requirement, that you take it down to the lowest level. And so we were trying to track that process.
Hello, gentlemen. Jim Renan, Chief Elevator Inspector. The reason we did the lowest landing was, in most cases on a hydro, if it's gonna be for a long, extended period of time, there could be possibly some leakage, so we want that at the lowest landing, just so that there's no elevators crashing. On a traction elevator, of course, we would make the exception of letting them have it at the top landing, because then your counterweights would be landed, but we want to keep the instructions as plain and simple
Okay.
as possible.
Got it, okay, thank you.
And again, in subsection C, in your version that was sent out in your material, we're going to strike that subsection. And so that would leave subsection D, which will now be C, which tells the owner how to bring it back into service. So we have 3 steps: take it out of service, restore power, and bring it back in service. And that concludes the discussion of the proposed changes to implement House Bill 3741.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, thank you. Board members have any questions?
Just very so in general, this is Scott Anderson. We are just simplifying and putting in writing a new class that for taking, we're not removing it from service, we're just taking it out of service. And basically, this is a temporary, is there a length of time within this?
No, sir.
Okay.
And again, to pick up on one of your implied comments, is that this is a new class, a new category, and the intent and the purpose is to, without implementing this rule, there's no way to temporarily take it out of service. You gotta have it inspected, or it's gotta be running. Or you gotta take it out of service per code, and those things are costly. So this is kind of a middle ground, which would allow a elevator or escalator to come out of service without shutting without dismantling it or doing anything that was required by code in order to bring it out of service by code. This is kind of a middle ground, temporary holding pattern.
And again, I have no problem with that, but is there any reason so they can do this in perpetuity?
As long
Leave
as-
it at this level?
As long as it doesn't run. yes.
Okay. I mean, I just want to make sure that we shouldn't be addressing how long we can leave it that way.
Oh, actually, we're not.
Okay.
Well, okay, so, and then maybe Jim, you can come back. Okay, I guess from a layman's standpoint, what's the difference between out of service and removed from service?
Jim Renan again. Out of service per code is basically counterproductive to a building owner that has future plans of remodeling his building or his elevator, because those requirements, you have to dismantle parts of the elevator. On a hydraulic, the elevator has to be brought down to the springs, section of oil line removed, all the oil drained from the system, and the main line disconnect switch wires cut. On a traction, you're also removing all the suspension ropes,
Okay.
landing the counterweight. So on an owner that's, I'll give you an example that I always use, West Texas. Out in Lubbock, building's been vacant for 2 years, depressed economy, but they have future plans to bring this building back, and going out of service per code is gonna cost him up to $100,000 on a traction, and he's taking parts off the elevator. So we were trying to give the owners some way of putting them in limbo without having multiple enforcement cases opened against them with late fees and fines for not being inspected annually.
Okay. Well, again, from a layman's standpoint, every time you go up to an elevator for the day or they're working on it, they put a little label, out of service. So that's was from my understanding. I didn't know if that was out of service, meant it was just a temporary thing, that they were fixing something for the day or the, the limit switches or whatever.
And what
So-
we do here, Charles will even admit to it at our meetings, we have to make it clear up front when we talk out of service at TDLR, that's out of service per code.
Okay.
We have to use a different terminology like out of normal operation, down for repairs.
Right.
And then we came up with the removal from service category, which in the long run, I think it's gonna be very beneficial to the owners, because it's, I'll use the term one-stop shopping. All he's gonna have to do is get on the phone, call his inspector, and that inspector will verify that it's taken out according to our procedures, notify TDLR, and he's off our radar.
All right. And I guess also reading some of the backup, and again for the board, so the removal of service suspends any other required inspections.
Correct.
So they're not, if you're coming up on an annual inspection, if you have an elevator that's removed for service, you're not required to do that annual inspection, because that elevator is not serviceable, not open to the
Be
public.
careful, you're using removed from service. Are you meaning out of service, or, I mean, they're.
Removed from service.
Remove.
Okay, removed. So that's the permanent one where you've removed cables?
No, that's
No.
out of service per code.
Right.
This new category is removed from service.
Oh, okay, I had it
Yeah.
backwards. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, so the out of service is kind of, yeah, you're cutting pieces, you're taking parts off, and it's very expensive to get it back going again.
Right.
The removal from service, again, like Charles was saying, it kind of suspends the inspections and the activities. And I think that's where part of the enforcement comes in. As long as TDLR sees that the inspection hasn't been done, then they're gonna send out notices to the owner, say, you haven't got your elevator inspected, because you've missed your annual, and if the owner isn't, well, a lot of owners ignore this stuff, they say, well, I'm repairing the elevator, it's not operating, so I'm gonna ignore that. But
Yeah.
then TDR doesn't understand that, so it goes into enforcement. So now it's, if you're gonna have your elevator down, remodel, again, you're getting ready to sell the building, or whatever reason or purposes, there's a suspended category here where you can pay for $20. So for $20, you can pay your fee to get that elevator removed from service, and it suspends inspection requirements.
Okay.
Is that
And this
a fair
discussion-
summary?
This discussion is the very reason we thought it important to include a definition for out of service, so that there's a distinction between out of service in accordance with code, and then removed from service in accordance with the rule.
Right, okay. Okay, so now with that definition of this gets understood, then Charles, here we go. So on 74.55,
Yes, sir.
the E, I think Lawrence also had a comment about that, was, the last part you had there was, or removal from service. And again, the terminology, is it removed from service, or is it removal from service? And I think his comment was adding the equipment is removed from service.
Yeah, we'll go back and look at Lawrence's comment and make it consistent. I think his comment was to be consistent, so we'll make sure that it's consistent.
Now, then the first part of that, inspectors using the online inspection reporting system. Is there any other way for the inspectors to report other than the online?
Will they notify the agency that they're performing an inspection, whether it be an acceptance or annual, on the online, and all they're reporting is that they are performing an inspection that day? Then we wait to get the hard copy report from them, and that's when all the information is inputted into our database.
Okay. All right.
On 7469, Lawrence had a comment.
Yeah.
Concern was that he believes that as written, it would prohibit a person it would prohibit a deceased person from being,
Yeah, I mean, is it rescue or is it recovery?
Written would.
He's basically saying it prohibits recovery.
Of a body, and,
Yeah, I didn't truly understand that comment. I prefer if we would kind of publish the rule as is, and Lawrence can, at the next meeting, kind of discuss.
Yeah, well, I think that the brackets, when you define out of service, you said the brackets, except as necessary to extract an
I'm pretty
injured
sure they'll
party.
get it out.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I
it's,
mean, I'm not following his thought process.
well, because you kind of define what a reason to take it out of service as to extract an injured party. So that would be a recovery. If it was a deceased person, he kind of, I think is saying that the brackets may not, it may be confusing whether they were permitted to move the elevator to remove a body.
So if somebody got killed,
Yeah.
you couldn't remove them because of what you're saying.
Injured affected party.
Existing language is what he's saying.
So, okay.
Okay, so you all absorb that.
I'm sorry?
But yeah, you guys will
Yeah,
talk amongst yourselves.
We'll talk about that ourselves, but I think it's better than we try to infer what he intended. There'll be opportunity for Lawrence to come back in the next meeting and flush this out. I prefer that we do it that way, so that we don't put words in his mouth or misinterpret
Okay.
what he's trying to say. 'Cause as written, I don't understand what the concern is.
All right. 74.105A2 on the escalators.
Oh,
Escalators must have the mainline disconnect switch locked in the off position and each entrance end barricaded. So again, terminology, is each entrance end an entrance and an exit, or does that mean both ends of the escalator?
Both ends, you have
Okay.
the lower end and upper end, yes, sir.
Each
But I
entrance,
think, if you,
okay.
Just
I
let 'em
think
go
that's
both
something
ways.
we can clarify.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not in the industry, so it's like, okay, you have an entrance end, we have an exit end too. You know, whichever,
Depends which way it's going.
well, in my, again, in my mind, you know, layman a little bit, yeah, I was like, oh, y'all have to block one end?
We'll fix
Well, I'm
that.
the entrance, I mean, I'm blocking the entrance end, that's what
I
you said.
understand.
Yeah,
We will fix it.
okay. And then I'm confused under the 74.105, the B. So equipment removals from service may only have the power restored. So is 1, 2, and 3, is it 1 and 2? Or 1 or 2 or 3?
You lost me.
It's or.
Yeah, I mean,
You can do
Here.
or any of those. He's asking if you have the choice.
because after 1, there's no or and.
That's what he's asking.
So do I have to do 1 or?
No,
is an or
It's
situation.
one or the other,
Yes.
but not all three.
We only have the power restored, so the contractor can have the power restored, or the registered inspector can have the power restored.
Right,
Correct.
correct.
Well, but the inspector doesn't do maintenance to the equipment.
He doesn't do maintenance of the equipment, but I think the intent here is that the equipment has been inspected. I mean, the equipment has been,
And all he's doing in that instance
Is
is
the
removing the
inspection.
lock that he put on and turning the disconnect back to on so he can perform an acceptance or an
Right.
annual inspection, so he's not actually doing any work.
because you gotta remember that once it's offline, you can bring it back online by the inspector. So this is just simply saying that the inspector has the ability to turn the power back on, as well as in a later section, bring it back into service.
Okay, or with the approval of the department, so the department can approve it without the inspector or the contractor being there?
Yes.
I don't know of any situations where that's been done without us going through an inspector or a contractor, but that's similar language in the existing rules on other parts of the elevator.
And Mr. Chairman, bear in mind that all we're doing in this section is turning power back on. We're not putting it back in service.
Oh, okay.
It's just to turn power back on in order to do the inspection or whatever reason short of bringing it back in service.
Yeah.
Subsection C will pick up how you bring it back into service.
Which, okay, the new C, I'll just look at the new C. Can you flip to that?
That's Lawrence's.
Looking for C.
So, yeah, so C, so all other, so, equipment
It may be simple, if you look at it this way, subsection A simply says how you take it out, how you remove from service.
Mhm.
Subsection B is focused on power, restoring power short of bringing it back online. Subsection C actually says how you bring it back into service. So you got three concepts going there.
Oh, got it, okay. Yeah, I was looking to the new C, I was looking at C, but that's the old C.
Yeah.
So then, equipment removed from service shall be returned to service after performing an approved acceptance or annual inspection.
Correct.
So acceptance would be that it's a new unit. So you do acceptance for new units.
Or on an altered unit. That's
An
what-
altered, okay.
Yes.
Or that they just did whatever to it and they're just coming back with an annual. Or that they didn't do enough to it to be an altered unit, they're just bringing it back to an annual.
Correct. Could have just fixed a couple of violations or something to that extent.
Yeah, it could just take them 2 or 3 years to do it.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense to me. How about the rest of the board?
Sir?
Good here?
Okay?
Well, what we will do is, since the board cannot vote on it, we will go back and look at the discussion and make some revisions as necessary, publish it, and bring it back to the board along with comments. So, and hopefully we'll have a quorum, including Lawrence or anybody else who has concerns about it, and we'll address their concerns at that point. As long as the edits don't make the revisions don't make the rule more onerous than the published version, but I don't think it will.
Okay.
So we will go out as is right now with these to the public for
We'll go
comment?
out as is, subject to the areas that we talked, that we will take the initiative to make edits to based upon just discussion and Lawrence's written comments without the board voting, and we'll bring it back to you in that context.
Very
So
good.
You'll see Lawrence's concerns addressed, any other concerns that may come to us through public comment.
Okay, so I guess the tentative schedule for publishing in the Texas Registry, I assume is 2 or 3 weeks out?
We will get it to the register, I will assume, next week,
Okay.
because we've missed this week's publication. And shortly after that, it should be published, and that'll go to the website once it's published, and then we'll get another meeting set for the full board to consider.
Right, and at that point, it's open for public comment. Anybody and everybody can view the proposal at that point.
Yes.
Make any other comments or hold comments for the board meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, well, again, is there any other comments from the board?
No, sir?
All right, well, again, I appreciate everybody being here. I apologize
Mr.
that we
Chairman,
didn't.
before you.
Yes, sir.
Before you rush off, sir.
Okay.
I know this has been a long and tedious meeting. First of all, thank y'all for staying here and having a discussion. Let me let y'all know, we do have a pretty tight timeline on these. In fact, we originally had a schedule of, I think, let's see, October 5th, so we're already a little behind. So that's why we had y'all go ahead and discuss these so we can kind of keep these moving along here. So, we published the rules in the register for 30 days, and then y'all have to come back and discuss the public comments, if any that came in, and make a final recommendation to the commission. So, in order to facilitate that, we need to probably go ahead and schedule another meeting. And to keep in track of the timeline, we're looking at probably December 15th, 17th, or 18th. What day of the week are those dates? Do you know off the top of your head?
15th is Tuesday, 17th is Thursday, and 18th is Friday.
Okay.
And for purposes of the record, the date y'all agree upon or come to terms with is a recommendation
Right.
and not the board has voted that the meeting will take place on X date.
And of course, we'll poll the other members of the board and try and get a date that works, but just, okay, well, do we even need to go through the process then of having to make a recommendation, or?
I think it'd be better to poll as we normally do.
Okay.
And just stay clear of the implications of the decision being made.
So, but those are the dates we'll be looking at, trying to get a quorum.
So teasing us that they'll be December, it should be
Well,
December.
whatever, do not have it on the Friday before Christmas, okay? So,
Well, I may not be here,
okay.
so.
I'm just saying, don't have it the Friday before Christmas,
I won't be here.
because there will be a shortage of quorum at that point.
I hear you.
So, your comment is your recommendation would be to avoid the 18th.
That would be my recommendation.
All right, well, you and the other members will be contacted to schedule another date.
Okay.
And it will be during that week sometime. That's what we need to do, stay on schedule, so. So I guess, any other business then?
Okay. Well, that's it. Well,
Thank you,
again,
sir.
thank you, everybody. Let me officially close the unofficial meeting. Thank you
Fine
all.
job, sir.